Hello all, Alison here. Welcome back to Words and Pictures for another Watercolour Wednesday. I'm again working from a need. I need a few watercoloured images of a few botanicals, working to a reasonably specific colour palette. So these aren't necessarily going to be naturalistically painted. If you want to see more sort of naturalistic colours going on, I will link to a couple of those kinds of videos in the description below. But for now, what I want is just to get started with yeah, I've got my Daniel Smith paints out and ready to go. Little spritz of water just to warm them up. Not really entirely sure where I'm starting. I might start with these Rosehips. We might not do all of these, but I just thought I'd invite you along for a little bit of the journey. I sort of want burnish, rusty colours, so I think I might start with just a very light wash of something like the burnt umber, and I'm just going to get that started onto these Rosehips here. Let's give them something a little brighter. So that's the burnt sienna light, and I'm going to try and preserve a little bit of light in the top corner. I might as well paint them the right way up, actually, thinking about it. There we go, something like that. And then I'm looking for sort of bluey tones in the leaves. I might start with a bit of Mayan blue genuine, which is one of the beautiful mineral colours from Daniel Smith. And I'm just, I want something a little bit unusual from these Rosehips. I don't want them, as I say, in a full-on orange and pink and so on, but I do want hints of that summer gold. So that's a bit of Aussie gold going in. I think that's quite nice. And maybe something like, ooh, maybe the Cobalt violet could be fun in those leaves. Let's see. And again, I'm painting with a larger bristled brush than one might think one wants. This is on quite cheap watercolor paper because it's, you know, it's working with stamping as opposed to a full-on. That's quite fun in there, isn't it? That purpley tone. Purples and rusts still very much the order of the day around here. I had a very rusty January, and I did one of my favourite creations with rust and crackle and lavender, real lavender, bringing that real lavender that had dried, somewhat faded as it dried, and bringing it back to life with paint. So for the stems, I am going to use my number 2. That's the number 8, I think, round that I've been using up to now. This is a number 2, so those stems are very fine. I'll zoom in so that you can get a closer look at what's happening. I now have to be careful, of course, not to go off camera, which is the thing that can happen when I zoom in and I forget that I've zoomed in, and then everything vanishes into the background. This is grey titanium, which is a big favourite of mine. And I'm rather liking the sort of fantastical colours of these as a change from, I think we want some Moonglow, or always want some Moonglow. Moonglow might be the best Daniel Smith colour ever. Just going to let that drop into the shadows there. That has slightly run into the colours around it, but that's absolutely fine. We've got time to play and just draw that colour down and away. If there's really too much of it, then a little bit of kitchen towel will do the trick for you. So just going to dot a little bit of that into the shadows of these twisty leafy parts. So that twistiness that's been happening in the recent stamp sets actually started a lot longer ago, didn't it? these twisty leaves on the Rosehips, and I'm dropping a touch of Moonglow shadow into these edges as well. Just to create dimension. Quite enjoying the white space that's left. It's got a dynamism to it that I really like. Let's drop a little bit of Moonglow into the shadow of the leaf, and maybe a little bit of Moonglow down this stem. And it's the darks that give you that lovely sense of contrast, of course. Let's pop a little bit right in these shadow bits where the leaves meet. There we go. That might be what I want for that. Quite like that as a dramatic version of the Rosehips. Let's go for something slightly more traditional, just a touch of, ooh, I really don't want to risk putting the green in. I'm really enjoying that version of Rosehips. Let's switch to some blackberries since I've got purples on the go. I'm going to go in with the Moonglow to start with and just fill in a few of these blackberry shapes. So the joy for me of blackberries is the colour variation that goes across them. You rarely see a blackberry that's all one colour until it's really, really fully ripe. So a little bit of extra water will just enable us to shape those blackberries with a bit of dimension again. Let's come back in with some Moonglow here. And the other thing with these stamps is that the foliage on all these berries, on blackberries, raspberries, and even white raspberries and golden raspberries, the foliage is all the same. So you can really paint these blackberries any colour you like, and it will be a truthful version of the plant. If truthfulness is important to you. Let's take a little bit of something. I wonder if Purpurite Genuine is another mineral colour. That's just going to bring in a hint of something a bit pinkier to a couple of these berries. Yes, that's nice. Let's get a bit more of that on the go. A little bit of water, again, warms up the paint. Keeping things quite loose, quite easy. I'm quite keen on preserving some white space, because that again just gives us highlights. I can always go back in as well with a little dot of white pen or white paint. Create a little more depth right at the heart of that one, and a little more depth there. These again, I sort of want to go with a shadowy blue-green. Might start with a little bit of the Mayan Blue Genuine this time, just to give me a hint of leafiness. And again, this is working to a colour palette that is dreamy and maybe a little bit unusual, but I think there's something nice about taking these images out for a ride occasionally, something that is not photographically botanical, if you like, something that gives us a different view, makes us look afresh at what's on the paper in front of us. And that's the joy of having them as stamps, of course. I don't need to do the hard work of sketching them every time. I can just choose to stamp them again and play with some different colours. And that's always going to give me something with a bit of variation, a bit of difference. Sort of tempted, as a contrast, to add a little bit of rustiness at the base of some of these berries, which again is something you do very often see in life. And it just gives us the contrast of that burnt sienna light just brings those blues to life. Quite enjoying that. Let's pick up a couple of those bits that are very dark. Again, in with the kitchen towel, that'll do a job. I think I do just want to give that green a little bit more. Cobalt green pale, I wonder what that'll do for me. No, not interested in that. I'm going to cover it up with a bit of grey titanium. That's much more interesting to me. The green became too literal, whereas the grey titanium is giving me something unusual again. That's rather nice. I might lift up a little bit of this orange that I put in, burnt sienna light, in fact. Again, quite nice. Going to lift up again a bit of this. So if I just go in with a wet brush, that gives me the chance to lift colour, which is going to reinstate a bit of that stamping detail. Nice. And then I might do one version that is a more realistic one, but for now I'm going to move on to these Hawthorn berries. Again, I'm going to start with the burnt sienna light because I think that's going to be quite a nice colour, and you can see I'm really applying that very loosely. I want a sense of life and movement in these. I'm going to pull a couple of those bits back. There we go. That's going to give me the chance to go in with maybe something like, Lunar Violet is calling my name, and maybe even some Cobalt Violet. Again, contrast to give these berries a bit of detail that is unusual. So I'm sort of mixing Lunar Violet and Cobalt Violet right on the brush there, and then right on the page. And I really like actually how it just mixes with the burnt sienna light as it goes to create something shadowy. You'd see these berries at dusk, just a bit dark on the bough. I might take some of that with some grey titanium for my stems, twiggy stems, very fine again. So I'm really just basically touching the tip of the brush to the paper. I'm not pressing down. I'm just letting the brush leave behind some paint as it goes. And as long as your paint is fluid enough, it will fall onto the paper. It's more that than really painting. To come in with something just a bit darker, maybe the Van Dyke brown, to give a bit of definition to these berry edges. These sort of yeah, the berry detail, the seed head detail, I guess that's around the mouth of the berry. That's nice, brings them to life. And as you can see, I'm really just dotting that detail on. I'm not trying to be terribly precise with it. Some nice, interesting things going on. It really changes the look of them to just let that colour be a variation of what you might expect to see. I really like these. The colour that's going on in there is rather beautiful. Grand. What else might I want? I think I'm just going to pick up a bit of that purple. Oh, I've got the little Rosehips here. Let's do a version of the little Rosehips that's quite similar to these. So I think I started with it was burnt umber actually, wasn't it, first in? So I'm just going to put that around one side. And I'm going to come back in with some burnt sienna light. Wow, look at the fire of that. And then I think I also added, I think it was some Aussie gold, but I might this time go with some Quin burnt orange, which I do love. I'm just going to take that round this side for a really rusty, fiery look. And I'm letting the paint fill things in by itself, really. Come in with some of this purpliness that I've got on the mat already. There's purples and greys and all kinds of things going on in there. So I can just use those to start to fill in detail here in these twisty, twiny, petally, leafy bits. That's very satisfying. Let's drop something slightly darker right in at the stem. Look at the drama of that. And I hope this is sort of one of the things that I think is useful about this kind of process, is noticing how less can be more. Not perfect colouring in, but something a little bit loose and adventurous can bring things to life in a different kind of way. Watercolours, remember, will dry paler than you're applying them, so I know that those will back off a little bit, but I do want to lift a little bit. So again, I've rinsed the brush and I go in and just lift a bit of colour. It's also slightly blending those streaks of colour that we put in, but I don't want to do too much because I really like what I've got there. I come in with some Mayan Blue Genuine, which is the colour that I was using on these leaves, and just let these be a slightly bluer version. Oh, need more liquid. Water is your ally with watercolours. It's colour plus water, and it's water that allows some of the magic to happen. So in a blue version with some hints of purple, that's again just getting us some detail. And the other thing with all of my botanicals is that they are designed so that they can work in multiple directions. So yes, your rosehips might be growing upwards as a stem, but they might also be dangling downwards. It comes and goes. That's an extraordinary colour. That's the burnt sienna light again. This time I'm sort of tempted to come in with a bit of the grey titanium. Really need to top up my grey titanium to create an altogether winterier berry. And again, just allowing a little bit of fluid into the mix so that those colours shift and move pretty much by themselves. They'll move into places where there's fluid. So where you put water, the pigment will move to there. If there isn't water, the pigment really shouldn't flow to that place. If your watercolour paper is any good at all. This, as I say, is quite cheap paper, so I'm not expecting miracles from it, but it's doing a pretty good job for a cheap watercolour sketch paper. Let's put a touch of shadow round in there, round in there, round in there. Nice. I'm enjoying that manganese blue, so I'm going to get a little bit of it into here as well. Just touches of that blue colour to create shadow. Nice, enjoying those. But you can see the colour palette that's kind of building here. This purpley rusty little game going on. So I shall finish these off and undoubtedly dive in for a close-up. But I hope you've enjoyed that little dip into some alternative watercolour colours, letting yourself take adventures, because after all, if you've got stamps that allow you to do that, why wouldn't you take advantage? Play with colours, see what makes your inner colour heart sing, see what makes your teeth go zingy. Thanks so much as always for your company, and happy crafting all. Yeah, can't resist hopping back on. So I put a bit of colour around one side, bit of colour around the other side, and then all I'm going to do is put water in the middle. And look, the berry will paint itself, the rosehip. Just letting that happen in and of itself, and the blending of the colours there, just magic. So let's see if we can achieve something similar on the leaves. Maybe, what's this? Blue Apatite Genuine. Going to put that down this side. A little bit of Moonglow. And again, clean off the brush and just add water into this half of the leaf. It's my other favourite thing to do, and I just hadn't got round to doing it on this particular video. So apply colour in one area, clean off, apply water in another area. Apply colour in one area, clean the brush off, apply water into the rest of the area where you want that to travel to. And it's a joy just watching the pigment move. One of the great joys of watercolour is watching paint do the painting for you. So there's some colour, here's some water. Just down into those spaces. Here's some colour, here's some water. Pop a little bit into the shadows there. Yeah, and while the water is wet, the colour will move. It is a kind of magic, to quote a Queen song. I'm going to come in with some Moonglow in through these stems. Those were, again, I think, burnt umber, burnt sienna light. Those were the colours on those berries. And because that water has travelled into the whole of that berry, again, if I want some white space, which I have really enjoyed here, I can come in and lift up with a clean brush, a fairly dry brush. Again, if you've got decent paper, you should be able to lift a bit of colour away to create that sense of lightness and brightness as the light hits those rose hips. Enjoying all of that quite a lot. I think I want just a little bit more manganese blue in this leaf. Mayan blue, beg its pardon, Mayan blue genuine. Have I been saying manganese all the way through? I've just been misreading it because my writing's quite small in the paint colours. Grand. Okay, I just thought I should really pop back on and show you that beautiful wateriness happening. Now I am going to go away. Comments, questions down below, always welcome. I'll leave details, probably of some colours, but at least of the Daniel Smith paints down below. So yeah, take a look there. And if there are relevant videos for you to have a look at some more watercolouring of botanicals, I'll leave links in the description below the video. Happy crafting all.